guys, it's Robert here, and this is my review of the X Plus Godzilla 1992 from the Toho 30cm series Yuji Sakai modeling collection. The first thing that I want to say is that this is, in my opinion, a perfect Godzilla. Everything about this figure is great to me. The sculpt is amazing. The suit accuracy is incredible. The paint job is fantastic. Everybody knows that Yuji Sakai is one of the world's foremost Godzilla sculptors, but to me, with this figure, he has gotten Godzilla down to a science, because this is a perfect rendition of the Battle Goji from Godzilla vs. Mothra in 1992. One thing that Sakai is known for doing is basing his sculpts off of specific scenes from a film. So this Godzilla is taken from the scene where he marches from Mount Fuji to Yokohama, the scene where he's fighting the MB-93 aircraft. Those are the little ships that have maser cannons on the wings, and they sort of look like an upgraded version of a Cobra attack helicopter. But to me, this is more than just a perfect rendition of Godzilla from that film. This is a perfect representation of Godzilla himself. When you think of Godzilla, this is the image that you think of, and so to me, it's no wonder that Toho chose this Godzilla to be their definitive design. Now, there's been a lot of controversy and a lot of complaints on the internet about this figure before he even released. People online were complaining that he had pink in his ears and in his nostrils. They were saying that he was too thin, that his legs were too skinny, that he didn't have enough shoulders. I'm here to tell you that this Godzilla really needs to be seen in person to be truly appreciated, because as you can see here, this figure looks great, and I think that people who are passing on this figure because of pictures that they've seen, passing on this figure is a mistake. So anyone who was interested in this figure and maybe decided not to get it just because of a few photos that they saw on the internet, I would definitely reconsider if this figure is even still available, because I pre-ordered him from Hobby Link Japan a few months before he came out, so I'm not even sure if this figure is still available. Now, what I want to talk about are the things that I like about this figure, and then some of the things that I dislike. The first thing that I want to talk about again is the sculpt. I think that the sculpt on this figure is absolutely amazing. In my opinion, it's one of the best sculpts that Yuji Sakai has ever done. The dorsal spines on his back, the tree bark texture on his skin, his face, his teeth, his eyes. Again, Yuji Sakai has got Godzilla down to a science at this point, so everything about this figure is great. And then I love the closed mouth. So many Godzilla figures have their mouth open as if they're about to roar or unleash their atomic breath. So I love any time that we get a Godzilla with a closed mouth. The suit accuracy on this figure is incredible. This to me is probably the most suit accurate version of the Battle Goji that I've ever seen. He looks like he just stepped right out of the movie and onto this table, unlike the first G92 that X Plus put out, which was a really great figure, but it wasn't the most suit accurate. The accuracy on this figure is really great, and I think it's one of his best selling points. The paint job on this figure is fantastic. I love the bony white coloring that he has on his dorsal spines. I love the individually painted teeth. One of the things that people were complaining about when they first saw pictures of this figure was that he had too much pink in his ears and in his nostrils. I don't know, maybe I just got a good one, but as you can see in person, there's some pink in there, but it's actually very subtle. It's not nearly as noticeable as people were saying, and it's not something that you're going to notice displaying on a shelf from 5 to 10 feet away. Another thing that people were complaining about were the finger and the toenails. They said that they were too yellow. And again, as you can see in person, there's a little bit of a yellowish tint to it, but it's not nearly as bad as people were saying, and it actually looks really realistic. And then I love the eyes. The eyes have a glossy coating on them that makes them look like glass. They really help to bring the figure to life. And I like the amber coloring that they did on the pupils. They did a really great job of matching the color from the film. As for the things that I dislike about this figure, there's really not a whole lot that I don't like. One of the few things that bothers me is actually the tail. As you can see, this figure has a tail stand, which not everybody's happy about. But it's really not even the fact that he has a tail stand that bothers me. It's the fact that the tail is positioned so high. With most X Plus figures, the tail is sculpted in a way that it actually touches the ground, and in that way the figure can support itself. But with this figure, as you can see, when I remove the tail stand, he loses his balance and he completely falls backward. So this figure is totally dependent on the tail stand in order to stand up. And that just bothers me a little bit because I wish Sakai had just sculpted the tail to touch the ground and then the figure could have supported himself. Another thing that bothers me about this figure is that, like all Yuji Sakai sculpts, he's not a true 30 centimeters tall. He's more like 27 or 28 centimeters. So I just wish that this figure had been a little bit bigger. If he was another inch or so taller, then this truly would have been a perfect Godzilla figure. Now what I want to do real quick is compare this Godzilla 92 to the first Godzilla 92 that X Plus put out. And right away you can see the difference in height between the two. This figure is a true 30 centimeters tall, whereas this one is more like 27 or 28. However, my issue with this figure has always been the likeness. I've never really been happy with the likeness on this figure. He's a great figure, don't get me wrong. I love the paint job, I love the dynamic pose that he's got, I love his overall size. I mean, this is just a massive figure. And I like that the tail is sculpted so that it rests on the ground and he can support himself. However, the likeness just isn't there for me, and in terms of suit accuracy, the Yuji Sakai figure wins hands down. So both great figures, but for me, this is a better representation of G92. The next figure that I want to compare him to is the Yuji Sakai G91 that came out a couple of years ago. One of the things that people also complained about when this figure was first announced was that the figures looked too similar. Well, the suits looked similar. I mean, these movies came out back to back, so they're both representations of similar looking Godzillas. You can see that they're about the same height. This Godzilla is bulkier, he is a bit thicker in the hips and in the legs. This Godzilla looks a bit slimmer, but he was slimmer in the film. The G91 has more of a pointed snout, it's kind of angled downward, whereas the G92, he's a bit rounder. So they're both representations of similar looking Godzillas. However, they're both different enough that I think they're both worth getting. If you already own a G91, I think it's definitely worth it to get the G92. Again, they look similar, but they're different enough, and they both represent different Godzillas from their respective films, that I think it's worth it to own both of them. So, with that said, get this figure if you still have the chance. He's a great figure. He's one of the best sculpts that I've ever seen from Yuji Sakai, and he's probably the best version of the Battle Goji that we're ever going to see. That does it for this review. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave your comments below. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Sayonara.